to Sidebar, and I'm here with John Davies, of course, and also Mitch Toomey, the Director of Sustainability for BASF. Welcome to Sidebar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. You know, one of the things as I was looking for your background is I've discovered you've only been at BASF for about 3 months.
That's right.
You spent a long time at the United Nations, so I'm curious, what prompted you to switch from UN to a private sector company?
Well, I did indeed spend a good deal of time at the UN. Prior to that, I was in the private sector in consulting and so on, but the past 15 years really I've spent working on the challenges of sustainability with governments and civil society organizations and others. The big obvious point that everyone made is that we can't really make this work unless the private sector gets involved.
Right.
And so I figured that with my combination of skills, it was time to really go back into the private sector and work from the inside, you know. And so I chose BASF as a leader in sustainability and with the impact on several industries, you know, enormously powerful market position.
Okay, so your last role was Director of the UN Sustainable Development Goals Action Campaign.
Yes.
So how is BASF embracing the SDGs?
Well, it's one of the companies that the UN has always recognized as a leader in not only the chemical industry, but in the kind of the industrial sector as a whole. The SDGs are goals that kind of reflect all the aspects of kind of the unfinished business of humanity, whether you look at the environmental issues, the social issues, the issues of inequalities, even frankly of good governance itself. BASF has always made a commitment to these issues, not just for efficiency gains and for perfecting their efficient product processes, but really for the entire value they present to society. At BASF now we have a value to society model that looks beyond just the financial value of the company, but actually into the lives of the employees and the customers and the stakeholders of the company.
Can you give us an example of?
Well, I think we have a great deal of responsibility for example, in the extractive industries, in mining industries. The chemistry that we make is based on you know, essential materials, minerals, and so on. And we have an obligation to those working in the mines to be mindful of their health and safety. All the way down to customers at the end of the value chain. They're looking for solutions that they can feel good about using, that align with their own beliefs and values. So I think as a company, trying to map a path with profitability through that kind of that challenge of the value chain from the mine all the way to the customer.
Mitch, we spent the morning with the Supply Chain Transparency Summit.
That's right.
And we really focused on the human aspect of impacts of supply chains. So any reflection on what went on this morning?
Well, it was just delightful to see the collaboration from people from different industries, really. And I think that that's one of the great things about a conference like GreenBiz is you're bringing people together and a little bit outside their comfort zone. They may be used to talking to people in their vertical or in their specific segment of the economy. But what we found is that people from very different walks of life, whether it be looking at kind of the garment industry or the extractives, the NGOs, everyone was dealing with the same issue. And I think what brings us back together is the human dignity of the customer, of the supplier, and really if you can make an impact there, customers will feel the values of your product just as well as those who are working on the supply side of it.
I thought you made a really good point in summing it up this morning, talking about this rise of millennial consumers and
Yes.
what they're expecting. So I know you've only been at BASF a little while, but what are you seeing along those lines?
Well, we talk about supply chain transparency and looking backwards down the supply, but the transparency goes all the way from the customer, the end user of the material, all the way back. And I think that people now who've grown up with kind of information ubiquity, you have all the information you could possibly want, are starting to realize that they have an enormous power to change things just by the specific purchasing decisions that they make, the brands that they align themselves with, and everybody up and down the value chain has to be better equipped to deal with that consumer power that's emerging. And the young millennials, not only as individual consumers, but as mobilizers, influencers, bringing their own social networks into their value system. It's a force that hasn't really been in the marketplace before, and it's something to be reckoned with.
You know, to go back to the SDG conversation at the beginning, are there particular, I know there's 17, and that's
right.
You know, obviously a huge framework. Are there specific ones that you're really keying in on that would relate back to that supply chain
Well, I think that there's there's been a lot of talk about development and developing countries and how to improve the conditions there. But I think everywhere we look around our own communities, there's room for innovation. And I think one of the core, most exciting goals within that framework is this drive to innovate. And innovation is really just a call to action to change things that don't work. And I think that everybody can grab onto that. So while we all have to figure out ways through the kind of the big environmental challenges and the enormous social inequalities that we face, we all have good ideas. People have great ideas to solve the issues that are most dear to them. And so I think if we can promote ways for everyone to get involved through the valve of innovation, I think that's the most kind of impactful way to kind of amplify the goals themselves.
And you mentioned that transparency is end to end. So
right.
How do you get that up in the boardroom, right? That's where you also need to build support and transparency, I think.
Yes, well, I mean, the realization, for example, at the UN, we found that we couldn't have a holistic agenda unless we invited everybody to the design table, whether it be executives in businesses, civil society organizations. Once we brought everyone into that design room together, there was no kind of us versus them mentality. It was really a realization that we as humanity have a to-do list, and no, it doesn't matter what position you have in the kind of solution, everybody has to put their own efforts in the ways that they can, whether they're influential, have a position of power, or whether they actually have the ability to engineer something, a solution that nobody's figured out before. I mean, it's a very exciting time.
Well, Mitch, thank you so much for joining us here
Pleasure.
at Sidebar, and we're going to be going back to the main stage, actually to the main stage for the very first time.
Great.
But thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for having me.